Welcome back. It's going to be a one-story video. The timestamps, as always, they are in the description box. Opie wrote the first part of this story 3 years ago. And then 2 years later, Opie updated. A year later, recently, Opie updated again. If you haven't already, please hit the notification bell over there so that you know when I upload new videos. But let's get right into this story. Opie writes, Okay, so long story short, I've lived with my in-laws for 8 years, the entire length of my marriage to my husband. Initially, it was supposed to just be a few months, but we've had a series of disasters and setbacks that have prevented us from leaving. Everything from husband losing our savings, to me breaking my back, to cancer, to 2 parental deaths, to husband having a heart attack, and quad bypass in February of this year. Mother-in-law is verbally and emotionally abusive to both me and my husband and has been for years. Some examples. During father-in-law's cancer, mother-in-law was preventing him from seeing other family and sometimes preventing him from seeing doctors. Intentionally disrupts husband's sleep if she's mad at him. She does this by vacuuming the tile floor in front of our bedroom door and claiming she's, quote, just cleaning, unquote. Lots of cold shoulder/silent treatment stuff, especially around the holidays, while slamming doors so you still know she's upset with you. Frequently grumbles insults and pretends she didn't say anything, in particular calling my husband, quote, an ungrateful little turd, unquote, when he won't do something she wants the moment she demands it. Manipulative with money/gifts with strings attached. Recently insisted on replacing the tires on my truck against my wishes, then claimed my husband and I were using her as a bank when my husband couldn't help her assemble a bed the next day. He had a high fever. Encouraged my husband to leave me upon finding out I'd been assaulted as a teen. At one point, when my husband was intubated in the hospital because of his heart surgery, she physically blocked me from leaving the house and wouldn't let me go until I agreed if my husband died, I'd handle the remains according to mother-in-law's religious traditions. I just kept saying, quote, I don't want to talk about this. We'll talk about this when my husband wakes up, unquote. And she kept blocking me from leaving. This took hours. I've been desperate to get out for at least 4 years now, but again, disasters, and we've been stuck. We live in an expensive city and have had unstable incomes and lots of things have happened, and I know I've needed to get out for a long time. Well, my husband has finally managed to find a job that will support us both in a different state. About 300 miles from where I live now. He's been living in the new place, and we've been renting a house since just before Thanksgiving, but I've stayed with mother-in-law because we rely on my job for health insurance until my husband's insurance kicks in around February. Mother-in-law went out of town over the weekend, and I was at the house alone taking care of her dog and my dog. I got home from work Monday night to an interrogation about why I'd been later getting home on Friday than I said I would be. I said I'd hopefully be home by 6:30. I was home by 7:45. I didn't think this was enough time to justify calling someone to come check on the dogs again. She is furious with me for not keeping promises and lying to her about what I said I was going to do and being irresponsible and clearly incapable of caring for the dogs and telling the truth. The dogs are fine, by the way. We had a good weekend with lots of cuddles and walks. So, given that I know that I have to get out, here's where I'm at. Do I wait until February and move with my husband to the new place and stay with mother-in-law until then? Or do I grab my stuff and my dog and couch surf with my family of origin until his health insurance kicks in? Family of origin has some golden child/scapegoat stuff going on, where I'm the scapegoat, but is less abusive on a day-to-day basis than mother-in-law. The hold-up here is that my husband professionally uses a lot of very expensive tools that we've spent years investing in, and I don't have the ability to move these tools by myself, and most of them are still at mother-in-law's house, waiting for my husband to come back and move them, and me at the same time. Also, my truck is co-owned by my husband and mother-in-law, and I'm concerned she'd report it stolen if I took it. So I'd have to leave behind my only form of transport, but I could probably borrow a car from my dad or qualify for a small loan. I'm concerned that if I jump ship, she's going to damage or destroy or otherwise dispose of the tools that are going to make my husband's job sustainable in the long run. I don't think she's likely to escalate her interactions with me to violence or anything, but since my husband has left, she's been complaining that I'm not home enough and has started doing things like refusing to feed my dog until I'm home for the night. She's almost never out of the house except for about 2 hours on Sunday evenings for church. So if I do bail, I don't think I've got time to get my husband's tools, some of which require specialized equipment to move. I know that I can replace tools, and I can't replace me, even if the tools are very expensive. But I'm also kind of looking at this like, quote, the surveillance isn't a surprise. You've been worried about this sort of thing for years. You put up with this nutbag for 8 years. You can handle another 2 months, unquote. My husband is also miserable, alone, and extremely stressed at the new job. He knows exactly how toxic mother-in-law is and knows we've needed to get away. But since he started at the new job, he's already having higher blood pressure and lower oxygen levels than he has since his bypass 10 months ago, and worried that, quote, significant other and mom are fighting 300 miles away, and I can't do anything about it, unquote, is going to make him even sicker. He knows those stress levels aren't sustainable and is actually already looking for other work in the new location, but also the stress and long hours he's under should drop off after the holiday because sales should settle down. There's a huge part of me that wants to just pile my dog and all my crap into friends' cars and camp out fighting with my family of origin for 2 months and never see mother-in-law again. But there's also a big part of me that says, quote, that's a grand gesture that's going to cost a lot compared to tolerating her BS for another 2 months when you know you've got a safe out coming, unquote. I do want level-headed advice about this, but I also want to just kind of put my head down and cry for a few hours/days/years. Edit. My husband has a small machine shop that is pretty full, but that I can move a lot of my household stuff into. I've talked to him about this and he agrees that this is a good plan. His tools at the house require special scheduled equipment movers because it's more, quote, industrial machinery, unquote, than, quote, tools, unquote. Because he ran a machining business out of our garage before getting the new job. Our overall move plan has always included him coming back to supervise the move for the shop, but we aren't sure how much access his mom will allow him to have to the house if I leave before she expects it. One of the tools is owned by the trust left behind after father-in-law died, and I think we just have to say goodbye to that particular piece of equipment because mother-in-law had the trust broken and rewritten to be her trust when father-in-law died. This is the same situation with the truck. Father-in-law bought it for my husband, but mother-in-law was the one on the paperwork. When father-in-law died, mother-in-law put herself and my husband on the paperwork, but the rest of the stuff belongs to my husband, free and clear. So I'm documenting its condition and location. At the moment, I think my plan is to slowly move household goods and clothes and things a little bit at a time to store in his currently unused shop. We basically don't have any furniture other than one dresser that I want to keep. So there's not going to be much that I can move that I need help to move. My dad has agreed to let me and my dog come stay when I need to, and to let me borrow a car to get to work until I can work something else out. I don't want to go quite yet, because if I can make things easier for my husband when he comes back to finish the move, I would prefer to have them be as easy as possible, which means making nice with his mom for another 6 to 10 weeks. But I feel better knowing I have an exit strategy in case everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Edit again. I'm also torn between tolerating the cameras or booting them off our network. I'm tech savvy enough that I can ban the MAC addresses of the cameras, but she will 100% know that I've done it. So I'm leaning toward tolerating them, but avoiding the areas I know are in their field of view. Edit further. We also have a lot of guns in the house, and my plan is to move out the guns that I know belong to me and my husband free and clear. Everyone involved knows how to use firearms, but I don't think mother-in-law is likely to start shooting. However, if it comes down to needing to call the police for an escort out, I'd prefer not to have my or husband's guns involved. Okay, let's get some comments with replies from OP before we get OP's first update. Are you in the US? She's prevented you from leaving before and is surveilling you. This is domestic violence. Call your local domestic violence hotline and form an escape plan. Some ideas that come to mind. You're technically a tenant. If you are in the USA, you have rights to get your stuff and that stuff not be destroyed. You can do things like request an officer to be present while you move the tools out. The domestic violence hotline will know how to help you best. It's free. Call them. OP replies, I am in the US. I think if it comes down to a really bad situation, I'm going to end up having to call the local police department to escort me and watch me while I pack stuff up. I feel like I should mention that this whole situation also involves a lot of guns, but I don't think that mother-in-law is likely to attempt to shoot me. Someone else comments, I would also keep your routine not routine. Meaning do not tell her your schedule. You do not have to coordinate your life with her. Be careful of her sabotaging any packed belongings. If you come and go, and she doesn't know when, she may be less likely to have, quote, free time, unquote, to mess with things. OP replies, I've already lost that battle. She has a calendar on the fridge, and if I don't fill it out with my weekly schedule, she loses her crap. I've found that it isn't worth the screaming match to fight on that one. She has a history of sabotaging our stuff. I have food allergies, and 3 days after my husband left, she threw out all my allergy-safe food while I was at work because, quote, it was making the fridge too messy, unquote. I mostly eat at work now, but as a result of that, I know not to leave boxed stuff at her house. I'm moving boxes out a couple at a time. Okay, so 2 years later, OP gave us this update. I'm really emotional while I'm writing this. It hurts for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that hurts the most is that we actually got out for a while. Significant other got sick while he was living alone, and I was able to move because of work from home during the pandemic, and for about 9 months we were both out. But then significant other lost his job and only had health insurance in the state we'd moved from. So he ended up having to go stay with his mom in order to get follow-up care after a month of hospitalization. And long story short, it's now 6 months later. Significant other has just had an organ transplant and we are living with his mom. He was released from the hospital 2 weeks ago, then had to go back for a week and was released yesterday. And it hasn't been 24 hours and she's already screaming at him that he's wasting all the efforts of his doctors and must just want to die because he isn't following what she thinks his care guidelines should be. Significant other has been refusing to share his discharge paperwork with his mom. which I understand because she'll take the strictest possible interpretation of every instruction. At the moment, he's supposed to keep his legs raised and wear support hose during the day. So she's interpreting this as, quote, must stay in bed all day and must wear support hose at any time there is daylight, unquote. But because he's not sharing the info with her, she doesn't know that he's supposed to exercise and isn't required to use a walker. If she did know he was supposed to exercise, she'd scream at him if he didn't always exercise the same amount, regardless of his pain level. There's no winning. In the time that I was living away from mother-in-law, my dad moved out of state. So now mother-in-law is the only family we have in the state where significant other has insurance. He's trying to get paid through disability, but it hasn't happened yet. And I don't make enough money for us to afford rent on an apartment, and his out-of-pocket insurance, and his insurance deductible. So we've been living with mother-in-law. Everything is complicated by COVID. Significant other is immune compromised, so that makes roommate situations and shared housing really difficult. I'm trying to buy a trailer that I've negotiated with a friend to park on their property until we can find a more permanent place to park it. Buying rural land is being considered as a solution. Payments on a 20k piece of property and a 30k trailer are way lower than rent here. So that I can keep working remotely and we can have a place to stay that is safe for significant other while he's so fragile and keeps us both safe from mother-in-law. She didn't speak to me for the entire week of his last hospitalization and has been deploying silent treatment with me and screaming abuse with my significant other. At the moment, my plan is to stage our way out by getting a trailer while significant other stays with his mom and moving our stuff out under the guise of, quote, tidying up, unquote, the way she wants us to. Once significant other has gone at least a couple of weeks without being hospitalized, I'm going to move him to the trailer. And after a few months, hopefully, we'll have a rural property that is developed enough to move him to. And he'll be strong enough to drive himself back to the transplant center for monthly med checks. I've checked a few mortgage calculators, and it looks like with my credit score and my income, I can get approved for 100k as a home loan, which gets you a lot of nothing in Southern California. And hopefully that means I'll be able to buy a rural parcel. If not, F it. I can put a smaller, more remote parcel on a credit card and get dealer financing on a used trailer. I'm just so tired and so sad, and I can barely take care of my spouse because I can't go in the kitchen to grab him a sandwich without getting attacked in some way and ending up shaking for hours. There's not even any good way to get out to just clear my head because I'll be accused of not taking significant other's COVID risk seriously. So I've been walking our dog as much as I can, but even the effing dog is traumatized and freaks out if we get more than a few hundred feet away from the house. I've been seeing a therapist remotely and trying to stay in contact with friends and trying to enjoy the time I do get to spend with significant other. He was in the hospital for nearly 3 months, and for the first month he wasn't allowed any visitors. The hospital does offer a sort of temporary dorm/housing situation for people who don't live locally, but I'm not sure we can afford that either. But I'm having significant other ask his social worker. I think if we were in almost any other situation, I'd just go. Take my dog and get roommates and let significant other and his mom sort it out. But I think if I do that, it's going to literally kill him. Edit. We currently have a storage unit because we never fully moved in with mother-in-law after moving out. So most of what we have at her house is clothing and computers and other essentials. That was a year ago, and now 3 years since OP's first post, we have another update. Okay, so things got a lot worse, and then they got better. After my last post, significant other ended up so sick that he needed a dual organ transplant. There was a very funny moment in there where he was talking to mother-in-law and said, quote, "I'm just very stressed right now," unquote. And her response was, quote, "You're stressed. How do you think I feel? My son is dying," unquote. And it was maybe the worst thing I've ever heard her say. He was admitted to the hospital as a transplant patient in early 2021 and got out with his new organs in July 2021 and is now pretty much fully recovered. My cousin, who was renting my dad's house, has purchased a home of her own, and I'm now renting my dad's house with significant other, which allows us to afford to stay close to the transplant hospital. We started moving in late July 2022, and we were moved into the new place by August. We still have not been able to move significant other's workshop out of his mom's house completely, but he goes over there to work about 2 to 3 times a week. And things are much better when he's mostly just having lunch with his mom and not living there and fighting constantly. We're planning on getting the full workshop over here eventually, but that will require my dad emptying his shed and garage, so it's probably not going to happen for a while. And since he's cutting us a good deal on rent, I don't want to say, quote, "Hey, come get your crap," unquote. My life is overwhelmingly better now that I'm not living with mother-in-law. There's no one stomping around the house and screaming. No one ripping out my plants, no one yelling at my dog, and no one yelling at my significant other, at least not where I can hear it. He's not happy spending as much time with her as he is, but he is happier than he was when he was living there. She still calls us about once a week, panicking that someone is breaking into her house, or she's dying or something, and significant other talks her down. He's trying to convince her to seek mental health care, but that's slow going. We're only about half a mile away from her, but it feels like a million miles. I've only seen her twice since we moved 4 months ago, and that sounds like about the correct amount of visits to me. She hasn't been over to our house to yell about our decor or say that we're irresponsible or ungrateful once, and I plan to keep it that way. Thanks for all the encouragement, folks. Much love, and hope to people who are still trying to dig themselves out. Let's get 2 comments with replies from Opie. So happy to hear from you. You guys were in such a tight spot. I'm really glad to know you came through it and are on the other side. Opie replies, "Thank you. Yeah, when I think about how I was planning on putting a trailer on a friend's property or getting a chunk of land in the desert on a credit card, it makes me realize how desperate I was. It's good to be gone." Someone else writes, "Wow, that is intense. So glad your husband is on the mend and that you have your space and freedom." Opie replies, "Thank you. It's so good to be out and to not have to worry about hearing from her on every single little thing that I do." Oh, Opie, I'm so happy for you that you are out of that situation. And I have so much compassion for what you've been through, you and your husband. You mentioned that you were getting therapy remotely. I hope you are continuing with that because what you're going through is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That's something that unfortunately is not going to go away overnight. Your mother-in-law waged psychological warfare on the 2 of you for years, knowing full well how vulnerable the 2 of you were, with your husband's health, with the financial situation, all of those things. She took advantage of it to control your lives to the point that you had to write down your week's schedule. And if you didn't do it, as you said, it's a screaming match. The whole thing, I can tell it's been an absolute nightmare for you. And the thing is, a lot of people are in these kind of situations. I've said it before. Opie is not alone. We just don't know what's going on in the people around us in their lives. But I hope that once again that this story gives hope to other people that are stuck and wanting to get out and have a happy life. Opie did it. And it wasn't easy. You listen to the story. It was really, really hard. And the odds were against her and her husband. but now they're out and they're happy. Unfortunately, he still has to see his mother sometimes, but for the most part, they are almost completely out. Please don't give up if you are in a situation like that, where you are living with somebody that's really toxic. And because of your financial situation or whatnot, this person gets to call the shots, basically. And you just have to go with it because you don't have anywhere else to go. And it's also extremely, extremely bad for a person's health, mentally and also physically. Now, I'm sure your husband's health conditions, it's a lot more complicated than just having a toxic mother. But having a toxic mother and living under her roof has not helped the situation because it really wears a person down and your immune system down. If you know somebody in this kind of a situation, just let them talk, let them vent, let them cry, let them do what they need to do to get that out. And just listen to them, just hold their hand. Because you have no idea the difference it makes in their lives to have somebody to talk to. Even if you can't do anything else but listen, that is already a huge, huge thing. Well, once again, we've come to the end of another story. I thank you so very much for joining me, for allowing me to read the story to you. And if you did like it, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing and leaving a comment because it really helps my channel out a lot and I like to hear from you. But until next time, take very good care of yourself and I'll see you again soon. Bye.